Hi everyone, and welcome back to the show. Today we're talking about the concept and the idea of treating data as a product. And to do that, I've got with me Murali Bhogavalli, and he's the Group Product Manager at Tinder for the data pillar within the business. So Murali, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jason. Excited to be here.
Great, thank you for coming along. Shall we get kicked off with a bit about you, a bit about your background, how you got into data, and also why don't you explain who Tinder are for our wonderful audience?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm Murali. I'm a group product manager for the data pillar at Tinder. And how I got into doing this, early on in my career, I started working for Deloitte Consulting, and I was in their enterprise data management division. So I was going from one client to other, understanding their data problems, giving them data strategy, information management strategy, and sometimes implementing those strategies using tools.
Yep.
So that's where I started my data management journey. And after doing that for a few years, I joined a startup, built a data product ground up. This was in the enterprise SaaS B2B space. And after doing that for a few years, Tinder approached me, and I was intrigued with the volume of data I was going to deal with. Because in a typical enterprise SaaS B2B space setting, though you might deal with big data, from a volume perspective, it might not feel that big, right? So Tinder was going to be my first B2C experience.
Right.
So I hopped on, and I've been there for 2 years now. So I sit at the confluence of data and product. And overall, what I've been doing is bringing in a product flair to the data teams at Tinder.
Brilliant. We're going to get into what product means and data as a product and product management shortly. But get a bit about Tinder.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure everybody know, but for those of you who want to know more, Tinder is a social discovery app. I mean, we are primarily into dating, but because we connect people, it's more than dating now. It's a social discovery. People make friends on Tinder, and sometimes they make life partners. Sometimes they're just looking for a short-term relationship. So all of those together is Tinder for you.
Great, brilliant. Thank you for that, Murali. So let's it's an interesting sort of journey into sort of data products. So it'd be interesting to kind of hear your view on sort of what we mean by data as a product and how Tinder is starting to sort of think that way and treat data in that way.
Sure. Yeah. So data as a product is not a new concept, but at Tinder, for example, specifically at Tinder, our thought process has evolved around making data as a product. The way it was working before, and not just at Tinder, at any company out there, is data teams were working in service-oriented fashion. What I mean by that is they would get feature requests from product teams, and they would get into a queue. Whether it doesn't matter whether it's Jira or Monday.com or whatever, and data teams would pick up items from those queues and start working on those. Right. There was nothing around. Hey, have we done this before? Hey, can we reuse an existing solution that we have created in the past? So treating data as a product means bringing bringing product management practices into data solutions. Okay. So that's more around Agile methodologies and treating data as a product similar to the regular product that you build, right? So at Tinder, the evolution has been pretty clear on how we are thinking of data as a product. So the way we deal with our consumer teams today is the data teams want to be an enabler and provide a platform to deliver data products, and the consumer teams are then going to be owning these data products, and they're going to be doing analysis on those, doing additional transformations on those, And they own these data assets, if you will, and they take it from there. So the data infra and platform team is just going to be an enabler, and that's how we have evolved in our thinking.
Okay. And you mentioned about sort of agile practices within that and the kind of methods that you use to deliver those sort of data products. Is agile, has it been, so what does that mean in context of data, and is it you know, is it an evolution of the sort of, I guess we can call it traditional agile now, but the way agile has been done to sort of build out particularly digital products in the past, or is it kind of textbook?
Yeah, so as you said, Agile has also evolved along the way. There's a lot of newer versions of Agile. There's SAFe, and there's few more techniques that people use.
Yeah.
But I mean, from a data as a product perspective, putting that data product hat on, what we wanted to ensure was if your consumer teams, let's say AI and ML and experimentation and analytics. So these are your consumer teams, right? They have their own needs in terms of data. So your AI and ML teams, they're looking for creating data-powered solutions. And your experimentation and analytics teams, they're looking for data-driven insights. So if they have to deliver these products and insights to their consumers, essentially we are in a B2B2C space, right? If they have to deliver those to their consumers, they are looking for continuous delivery on data products that they are getting from the data infra team or data platform team, right? So what I mean by bringing agile practices is data teams can no longer work on a service-oriented fashion and go with a waterfall approach, if you will. They have to be more nimble, and they have to churn out more frequent updates to the data products. And they need to iterate along with their consumer teams, right? So that they bring in the feedback loops. And it's not like, hey, I have delivered this table for you and I'm done. It's more like, I have I delivered this table for you. What is the feedback? How is the adoption looking like? Can I make any more changes on this? And how is it in turn that you're delivering value to your consumer, right? So that's what the data infra team asks off of these ML engineers and data scientists and analysts, if you will.
Right. So in the model, I think in the model that you're explaining there, and I think, so I understand what you meant by B to C now, is the where you sit and the function that the sort of infra team, I think you're calling it, serves, is to provide kind of almost not finished products, but kind of ingredients that create elements that end up in a finished product, like a model or something that drives something that happens in the app, for example. Is that right?
Exactly.
Are you
exactly.
Are you also doing, and are you also building sort of finished goods, end products?
Yeah, so we are creating some finished goods. So the way we think about that, Jason, is sometimes our ML engineers and data scientists and analysts come to us with requirements for data products. And we look at the most common denominator, least common denominator across all of these requests. And we say, we see a pattern here, right? So instead of asking each of these individual teams to build their own transformations on their own, maybe along with the data platform that we are delivering, we'll also include these common metrics so that everybody can use, right? That's to eliminate redundancy, if you will, and also save time, increase efficiency.
Reusability.
Exactly.
Build once, use many. I'm a big fan of that.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, often hard to achieve in dispersed and teams, or where lots of teams have got a lot of autonomy within their area. Often there isn't necessarily that culture of reusability because people are sort of focusing on their own problems to solve, not the bigger picture. But
exactly. So yeah, with you on that. I mean, with this decentralization and autonomy of the data assets or data products, there's going to be, unless we put in standards in place and unless we have a robust governance, it could lead to chaos easily. As in, people, each of these data product domains can do things on their own in their own silo, but that's what we want to avoid. We don't want to have a siloed approach to solving these problems. We want to have a unified approach. So the data platform and the infra team needs to be the quarterback for all of these consumer teams.
Yeah, I like that analogy, the quarterback. So it does sort of come through to the prioritization, if you like, and the decision making about how to build out those data products comes through you so that you can serve multiple teams.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So from that perspective, data platform team has a bigger picture compared to individual consumers who are functional teams working on different things, right?
Yes, because your data platform's kind of horizontal across the piece, and then you've got use cases, if you like, or departments or functions that are sort of serving a certain purpose.
Exactly.
Yeah, got it. And one of the things you mentioned earlier on, and something that springs to mind here, is the idea of or the necessity, I suppose, for strong product management. If you're going to treat something as a product, you need good management around that product. How does that work for you? So what does sort of product management look like? What's its function? What's its purpose? And do you have product managers that are different from product managers that sit in other product teams?
Yeah, so good point. As in, once we start treating data as a product, once that culture comes in, right? If you are treating data as product, indeed, you also need people who can put on the product manager hat and help necessarily everybody in the organization to start looking at data as a product, right? Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, so from a data product management perspective, I think one of the biggest things that a data PM should be looking out for is how does my data map to the business goals out there, right? I think that's the first question a data PM should be asking, right? So let's take an example. The company comes up with a business goal of increasing revenue. Growing revenue, right? That's your business goal as a company, right? A data PM would then come in and ask the following questions. The questions are going to be like, well, what data does the revenue team use, right? So that's one thing, right? What are the features that revenue team owns, and what is the data that they collect from these revenue features, and how is it getting stored? Who is actually using it, who has access to this, and do they do any transformations before they actually use it for insights? And what is, if they are consumers, if there are multiple consumers, what are their latency requirements? What are their SLAs? Do they need it on an hourly basis? Do they need it on a real-time basis? Or do they need it on a batch mode for 24 hours or 6 hours or whatever, right? So all of these questions will help you prioritize what needs to be delivered to whom, and this actually builds your data product roadmap. And not to mention, and not to forget, that there's going to be a bunch of regulatory and compliance requirements around the data that is being collected, right? So are we compliant with the GDPR, CCPA, and are we putting in place security measures, and are we doing encryption on data? So all of these are the questions that are springing up from one business goal of driving revenue growth, right? Yeah. So a data PM, PM's job is to find out answers to all of these and prioritize on areas where there is no coverage in any of these topics that I've talked about, right? So that actually is essentially your data product roadmap. And the follow-up question that you had was, what does a data PM need to do, right? I mean, a data PM, for him or her to understand answers to all of these questions, they need to have an ability to understand data flow. How does the data flow in your organization? Yeah. What are the different systems it touches, right? And the other thing they need to know is they need to be able to work in a cross-functional setting, because the answers to these questions is not going to be coming from one team. You need to be a good team player. You got to know who to reach out to, and you should be conversant enough to to multiple teams in a cross-functional setting, right?
Yeah.
And more than all of this, I think one thing I would want to emphasize is there's little to no value given to EQ. I think this person needs to have a high EQ. The reason for that is you are dealing with subject matter experts in their own areas, and you're probably the least knowledgeable person, let's say in the context of ML or data science. You're working with PhDs often, right? So you might not have the most experience there, but your job is to take inputs from multiple people and drive everybody towards a single goal or unified direction, right?
Yeah.
So I think the soft skill that's overlooked oftentimes is EQ. I would give high priority to EQ.
Well, I think that's a consistent capability or concept, I think, for lots of people in this space, where you're interacting with people, as you say, that have got different experiences, different skills, but you have to play a part in bringing a whole load of stuff together and collaborating, and you need strong EQ for that. One thing sort of springs to mind here, and the way I think you guys at Tinder position data products and data product management, therefore, is kind of at the data. I think that's the key thing you're talking about. It's the platform and the data that is needed to do something else. So whilst driven from the use case in your example of increased revenue, your data product managers are focused on the data part of that problem and accessing, consolidating it. I suppose the other part of my question was, who's the other side of that? I think you talked about sort of insights teams and analytics and sort of machine learning engineers and that sort of thing. How many hops away from the challenge of increasing revenue are you? Because there are lots of different ways of doing that, isn't there? There's more customers, there's more advertising revenue, there's increase the spend from each customer or the engagement or whatever the metrics are that help you drive your revenue. And depending on which bit of revenue or the approach to driving revenue will then change the analytics you want to do, and will change the data that you need. So how do you interact with, so maybe it's other product managers, but how do you interact with other people to ensure that you're building the right products to solve the right problems?
Exactly. I think you got it there. You were talking about interacting with other PMs. That's exactly what we do.
Right.
There are PMs who are focused on growth experience, growth consumer experience, as well as engagement and different aspects of the business goals, right?
Right.
So we interact. The data PMs interact with these individual feature PMs, if you will. I'm calling them feature PMs for lack of a better term. So we interact with these feature PMs, understand what they're trying to build, and provide the data product capability to support that. Got it.
So fine. So you've got some product managers responsible for improving and iterating the bit of the product, the feature that they look after, and you guys collaborate on creating the end-to-end pipeline and data product needed to support that adjustment, change, improvement to the end product and the end goal. Cool.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So from that perspective, that's what I was trying to get to. The data PM or the data platform team needs to be a quarterback, because they are interacting with multiple feature PMs, and they're trying to get requests from multiple such teams for multiple such needs.
Yeah.
And most often than not, the prioritization exercise is understanding the least common denominator or minimum viable data product, if you will,
that meets most needs. Do you contribute to the so that's you prioritizing the data work that's needed? What about the other side? How do you prioritize the business metric or the end product that's needed? Do you contribute to that, or are you sort of simply in inverted commas taking the needs that come to you and prioritizing your work most effectively so you can deliver quickly, effectively back to those that are sort of asking for it?
Yeah. So there is one thing around working on needs, and there's one thing around being proactive and looking at what are the overarching goals for Tinder, for example, right? So what are the metrics that matter, and what are the business goals that Tinder has, and where can data teams plug in and provide value, right? Yeah. So from that perspective, the way we operate here at Tinder, and I think the way the industry is shaping around it, is there are business goals that are metric movers, if you will, and there are things that the data teams want to do, right? It's on their roadmap. They have been thinking about doing that for some time, but because maybe they are just plugging holes or working on feature requests, they were not able to do that, right? So we need to strike a balance between providing providing for feature requests, which is data products here and there, versus also driving the data strategy for setting up the data platform at Tinder for success for future, right? Yeah. So there needs to be a marriage between the business goals versus the data strategy from the engineering perspective. Yeah. And I see the data PM function as that capability to bring the business goals down to the level of engineering, and the engineering data strategy going to the level of business goals and creating a marriage between there, right? Yeah. So I think once they're aligned, that's the nirvana state. And it might be easy to say you need to do that, but in reality, to do that, it's super difficult because you need to align multiple people on the same vision, and you need to sell internally, and you also need to ensure that you're selling the vision to the business and leaders. At the same time, you're also selling the value to people who are actually working on making this happen.
Yeah. In my experience is digital native organizations like Tinder get that a bit more. So the kind of the understanding that where data can play a part, digital product managers who've probably been around for a bit longer tend to be quite metric driven, data driven folk anyway, and therefore the teams and the way you've set up. So where is the challenge in that sort of quandary that you put there? Because often the challenge that I hear from non sort of digital native companies is getting people just to get all of that stuff and get that data can play a part and help people think through solving problems through insights and looking at data. So where's the sort of what's the biggest nut to crack for sort of helping the organization to move forward for you?
Sure. Yeah. So I think I took the example of revenue growth, right? Most of the times, what companies tend to do, I'm not just taking Tinder as an example, but any company,
just more
right?
broadly,
in their growth stage, they want to use data for playing offense. Right. I'm going to bring in a sports analogy here. Right. You always want to play offense with data and use data for growth, more engagement, more retention, and monetization. Right. Yeah. So those are your focus areas in terms of growth of the company using data as a fuel. Right. But there's other aspect of playing defense with data, which is are we building resilient systems for future? Are we ensuring that we are providing the tools that are needed for data teams to be more efficient? I mean, thinking of developer efficiency there, right? Are we putting in enough governance in place for something like GDPR or CCPA or all the compliance needs, right? So playing the balance of playing offense versus playing defense is the challenging part, because playing offense, everybody gets it because there's a clear business value that you're driving with that, right? Playing defense, because you might not be able to quantify the value in the short term, but it's a long-term gain, right? Yeah. So I often see people struggling on this aspect of playing defense until something comes along and you hit a lawsuit or whatever. But what I'm trying to get to is striking the balance between that and ensuring that you have strategies for both in your data roadmap, in your data journey is the toughest part.
Got it. I mean, one of the things that helps with anything where there's like an investment required and it's a bit foundational, so it's not necessarily aligned to certain offensive strategies in your examples there, is the idea of automation and reusability, because that helps with making things efficient and faster and more effective. And ultimately there is a benefit to doing those things. How does that sort of feature quite heavily in what you do? We mentioned reusability earlier, but is that something that's sort of baked into the way you're thinking about sort of data products?
Exactly. Yeah. So the whole mindset shift around thinking of data as a product and thinking of different data domains to manage these data products alleviates some of the pain in terms of, hey, after I get the data that I need, the iterations on that, it's the onus on the data product owners now, right? I mean, for example, once we land the data into data warehouse, it's the analyst playground. Data analysts take over, and what kind of visualization they want to put on top of that is on them. I mean, whether they want to bring in a Looker or a Tableau or a Periscope, they can decide on their own. The data platform team or the data engineering team doesn't need to make the decision for them, right?
Yeah.
Same thing with ML and experimentation and others, right? So because you're trying to decentralize some of this decision making and providing the capability to your consumer teams, empowering them, what's going to happen is the data platform team then gets to work on, like you said, automation.
Yeah.
They get to work on things that matter in terms of playing defense, right? So while the data product owners can focus on playing offense and bringing requirements to the central data infra team, the data infra team then can focus on, hey, how can I create a interoperable layer between all these consumer teams, and how can I automate the whole data engineering process to make it minimally disruptive for delivering data products in the future.
Yeah, got it. And then the next time you get a request that requires something similar, at least you've got a thing to take off the shelf and apply it rather than starting from scratch every time.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. The reusability is the name of the game there, right? Like you said.
Awesome. How do you set yourselves up then from a I guess a structure point of view in terms of your team? So I get this sort of interaction you've got with other teams, and so how are you set up at Tinder to make this really effective?
Yeah, I think not just Tinder. Everybody started with a big happy team of big data. Everybody had a big data team, maybe 4 or 5 years back. From there, things have evolved. Now we have more nuanced roles, right? You have a data engineer, you have a data scientist, you have a machine learning engineer, you have a data analyst, right? So those are more prominent roles that you see in various organizations. And there are many more nuances under that as well. I mean, for example, to bridge the gap between a data engineer and a data analyst, we have somebody engineer, right? That's a new role that I've seen coming up. So as the roles keep evolving, I think companies will adapt to these changes. But what I see as a shift, though, is these groups of people or these roles were centralized. Now with decentralization of data products, I see a spread of these roles sitting in various data products or data domains, right? So because these people are going to be sitting in different areas, but there needs to be knowledge sharing across these folks, because again, we don't want to create silos like we discussed that in the last 5-10 minutes. Because we don't want to create silos, they need to be knowledge sharing. At the same time, these people, they need to be sitting in the specific domains so that they empower the users there, they empower the consumers there, right? So I feel it's going to be a more of a spread of decentralization of these roles, and I think I see few roles evolving from this transition as well, because now we are thinking of data as a platform. There's going to be a data platform engineer or data infra engineer or a data ops engineer, right? So those roles will probably more evolve in terms of there's a market need for those. But the existing roles as such, they're going to be more decentralized than centralized.
Got it. Yeah, and that gives a little bit more autonomy and control over to the way data is used and the way it's applied And also that it helps, I guess, spread the load, because the centralized approach, sort of, you have a bit of a filter, don't you, as a bottleneck through a central team, which can actually slow things, whilst it can bring best practice and governance and focus on the right stuff, yet it can also put in some bottlenecks that slow things down rather than speed things up.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. I mean, like you said, like we discussed, unless this whole thing is governed well, and unless there is standards that are put in place, which are not only put in place but also enforced, this could become a mayhem, right? So to get this right, I think that governance layer is needed. I mean, it's not needed; it's mandated, and it's paramount to making this a success, right?
Yeah. Have you seen something like OKR's work for that governance and prioritization and making sure everyone's aligned and working on the same stuff, or the right stuff, I should say, rather than the same stuff?
Yeah, so I'll take us back to the discussion we had in terms of playing defensive versus offensive, right? So in this case, most of the needs from an OKR perspective come from the consumer teams. So those teams which are working with the data products and do something for their consumers, end consumers, they're going to bring in their needs, and that becomes one pool. And the other pool is going to be all the data platform engineers who are working on building the central platform, right? They come in with their gaps. They would say, hey, we have built this central platform, but we don't have an observability, right? We don't have observability to see where the pipeline breaks. Maybe we just have alerts and monitoring here and there, but from an end-to-end perspective, we don't have an observability layer, right? So those are the kind of things that the data platform engineers could bring, right? So at that point of time, as a data PM, for me as a data pillar lead from the product perspective, I got to bring in these two different pools of OKRs and try to prioritize those. And obviously, you got to deliver value to business. At the same time, you got to ensure that you're building resilient systems, right? So looking at these gaps and understanding what's the short-term need versus long-term gain, and bringing everybody in from a leadership perspective on this vision is what the OKR conversation is all about in my day-to-day.
Yeah, cool. I see them used really effectively to drive that that decision making, and it means you can do it with along with everybody. It's not a sort of hidden exercise. You're making those choices as grown-ups, and you're saying no to some things, and you're prioritizing some things together consistently and collaboratively, rather than each team deciding what they want to focus on and just maybe pulling in different directions, which is a team like yours where it's a bit of a horizontal across your other platform team, product team, sorry. That's critical. Otherwise you're just constantly being pulled, aren't you, in every direction and never clear on what's important.
Yeah, and like you said, stakeholder buy-in is like any other product management aspect, you got to have your stakeholder buy-in. As a data pillar, you have your data consumers, AI, ML, analytics and experimentation, and you have your producers, right? Producers of data and consumers of data. These are your two big stakeholders, and the data team is in the middle, trying to deliver the data from producers to consumers. So stakeholder buy-in in this case is ensuring that the consumers are getting what they want, and the producers are able to ingest data into the data platform without having to go through a lot of hoops, right? Making it easy for them, giving them models, data models that adhere to highest data quality, if you will, and ensuring that they are ensuring that they are trying to put in their data through these models in an easy fashion is also something you need to work on. So what I'm trying to get to is you need to have a buy-in from all your stakeholder groups ahead of time. And the communication needs to be open. So what we have at Tinder is a data guild. All the data leaders meet on a bi-weekly basis to discuss the roadmap items and also discuss pain points in the existing world. And our prioritization happens in those meetings.
Right, got it. Well, that sounds great. I guess just to finish up, then, are you seeing this as something that is kind of landed in the industry? Is this? Do you think this is sort of people are shaping around this idea of sort of data as product and product management? I mean, we're pushing and prodding and poking this topic and implementing these ideas and these best practices a number of our clients, but it's still relatively new in, I guess, more mainstream, less digital native organizations. How are you seeing, I suppose, the industry kind of picking up on this, and how much is it, you're trying to kind of test and learn versus like take the best practice that already exists and apply it?
Yeah, I think the industry is definitely taking note of this. If I have to draw an analogy from, let's say, the API world, right? In the past, we had monolithic architectures, and people are moving towards microservices. Actually, that migration has already happened, right?
Yeah.
If I have to draw an analogy into the data world, as in when there's more and more need for data to be centralized and stored, companies start capturing everything and anything that is out there and putting it in the data lake.
Yeah.
And data lake has become this unwieldy monolith, if you will, that they're not able to move fast and deliver value to their consumers.
Yeah.
So bringing that monolith architecture to microservices analogy, what the data product that we're talking about here is similar to microservices. So taming the data lake or data warehouse or lake house, whatever you want to call it, that monolith, and breaking it out into sizable chunks is a microservices architecture, right?
Yeah.
So the industry is shaping around this for sure, because if you look at what a Databricks is delivering, they're saying no matter where your data is, whether it's a lake, data lake or data warehouse or lake house, will give you capabilities to build subsets of those data. One cater towards your ML engineers, one cater towards your analysts, things like that, right? So that's one aspect. But where this is going and where we might see more players coming into the equation with additional products is I would say, because we are trying to treat data as a product, and we are trying to build iterative products, there needs to be continuous improvements. I mean, call it CI/CD from the DevOps world, if you will. If you have to take something out of it, the data ops is going to evolve, and data ops is going to ensure that the data products are being delivered in a continuous fashion, and they're being, I mean, the consumers are getting value from it in an iterative fashion. So there's a lot to evolve in the data ops space. I know as a framework, it exists, but there's going to be tools coming around that. That's one area.
Yeah.
And the other area that I see where it's going to evolve is because of this autonomy and decentralization of data products. There's going to be questions around data health. There's going to be questions around, are we managing this data across different data products in a consistent fashion, right? So for that, I think observability becomes paramount across the end-to-end spectrum. And there's a bunch of companies which are trying to create data observability products to meet this demand, if you will.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some legs in this, and more tooling and more clarity over how you make this stuff successful. So yeah, sounds like some interesting areas to explore for you in Tinder and for other people as well, I'm sure. So listen, thanks so much, Murali, for coming on the show. I think your lens on data products and treating data as products is quite different from people that we've had on the show before, and what I'm hearing from other clients. So I think it's brilliant to sort of and other organizations. I think it's brilliant to see and hear how you guys are approaching it. So I really appreciate you spending time with us on that. So thanks for coming along.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Jason. I have one request, a shameless plug, if you
Go
will.
for it. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so we are hiring on the data team at Tinder. We are hiring for various positions on data platform and also on the data consumer side of the equation.
Okay.
And we're also hiring for data PMs. So if you are interested, based on what you've heard so far on how Tinder looks at data as a product, if you're interested, please reach out to me. My LinkedIn is my first name and last name. And my Twitter handle is mbhoga, mbhoga. So hit me up, and if you're interested and if you're like-minded, we'll take it forward.
Brilliant. Awesome. Well, I hope you get some responses to that. And so, yeah, thanks again for being on the show, and thanks everyone for listening. I hope you enjoyed the topic of data as a product and product management once again, and we look forward to sharing more with you in the coming episodes. So, thanks everyone.
Thank you.